There's foul whisperings abroad, strange screams of death. I think it's time that you and I sharpened our weapons, checked the powders dry, uttered a prayer to the twin-tailed comet, because you know where we're going? The city of the damned. So, today we're going to talk about something really different, but something as fantastically interesting as usual that we should be talking about. And the reason it's different is we're going to talk about a war game today. And we're going to talk about a particular war game that I think, as game masters, as players, as enjoyers of the tabletop hobby, should all kind of get to grips with, grapple with, have a look at, and see how its particularly presentation and formatting, as well as its gameplay and its rules, have influenced I would say grim dark fantasies and why this is cool and interesting. So we're going to talk about Mordheim. Now, I just want to preface this by saying that I know this is a different video to what I'd usually do, and that normally I talk through role-playing, RPG rule sets and modules. And today we're going to talk about a wargaming rule set. So not so different. Ultimately, I love everything that happens on the tabletop. I don't get the whole kind of like video game thing. And I don't get kind of, I don't get the whole sport thing. I'm not going to lie. But I do get tabletop games. And this is one that we should all be familiar with because it is brilliant and is really influential in the way it presents its ideas. So it's a war game. It was published in 1999, so it's quite old. 25 years old, actually. And it's written by apologies if I get this pronunciation wrong. Thomas Pirinen, with rules help from Rick Priestley, the Venerable Games Workshop rules writer, and Alessio Cavator, another extremely experienced war games author. It is illustrated by a number of people, and I wouldn't normally go through all the artists, but I want to because I want to talk about a couple of artists that are really, really important when talking about the ideas that and interesting philosophies that are espoused in this war game. So it is illustrated by John Blanche, Alex Boyd, Nuala Kennedy, Kyle Kopinski, Paul Smith, and John Wigley. They are the listed illustrators. It came out in 1999, and the basic rundown is this. It's a fantasy skirmish game where everyone in your gaming group plays a different warband of about five to 15 individuals. And they are all competing with each other. And it's in many ways influenced by role-playing games because these characters, as the matches go by, they can get injured, they suffer lingering injuries, they level up, they get more skills, they can really, really strange things. And each warband effectively becomes a kind of idiosyncratic expression of their experience on the battlefield, their experience at the table, and that particular player's preferences. It is set in Warhammer Fantasy's Warhammer Fantasy Battles setting, but it is a kind of very specific moment in that setting. So the rundown of the setting very, very briefly. Many hundred years ago, many centuries ago, in the year 1999, the city of Mordheim, which is an imperial city, has had a decade of debauchery and evil and kind of falling in love with demons and all kind of hedonistic rituals. And what has happened is we don't know why exactly, but they have probably been punished by the gods because what happens is an enormous meteorite smashed into Mordheim, scattering itself into 1,000 fragments all over the city. And this comet, this meteor, was made of warp stone, pure kind of the physical condensed form of magic and chaos. It's like, oh god, this is like creative and interesting. And as it did this, obviously, the impact itself killed like a huge portion of the city's population, and that warp stone spread itself out. There's a kind of vaguely post-nuclear element to this particular setting, and everything that this warp stone comes into contact with, touches, it mutates. There's like lurid tales in this of people being fused with the flagstones and mutants crawling around the ruins. And what the game is about is it's long after that this has happened, and different war bands working in the ploy of mercenary paymasters, wizards, and other interested parties enter the ruins of the city of Mordheim, the city of the damned, and to gather warpstone to take it back and sell it. And that's the primary kind of like motivation for the game. The setting is brilliant. It's a perfect expression of the what I would consider to be Games Workshop, that particular company at its best, which is always it has always been driven by the need to sell models because it's a model company. But when it has given its designers remit to take credit for their work, which they don't do anymore, and be as expressive and interesting as they can in their ideas and as creative and the creative freedom to design new rules, You get something that is very British, very kind of idiosyncratic, very kind of a bit mad and a bit post-punk and a bit grim, and that's exactly what's going on in Mordheim. The map itself of Mordheim is based on the city of Nottingham, which is where Games Workshop's based. If you want, I'm not going to go through the whole history of the rule writing. This is not kind of like this is not a history lesson. This is a ludological exploration of what I think is a brilliant game. But I would go and watch Jordan Sorcery's video on the history of Mordheim. I can't even remember if he's done one, but Jordan Sorcery does basically perfect histories of all of Games Workshop's products, and you should go and watch them. I want to talk about, as I say, a ludological exploration of why this is useful if you are a role player, if you're a game master, if you are someone who really enjoys playing on the tabletop like I do, because that's what what gets me up and keeps me going is really cool, interesting games and interesting experiences. So there are different war bands, and they're all differently themed. Some of them are kind of like ragtag mercenaries. Some of them are puritanical witch hunters. There are lots of fan rules for things like playing dwarves and orcs. In it, there is a kind of chaos mutant carnival faction. And I'm just going to show you this book because it is absolutely a feast for the eyes. It's glue bound. And if you can't get a copy of this, I'm sure you can find a completely legitimate PDF somewhere online. I'm sure Games Workshop provides that. But I would definitely have a look through this, because if you are interested in writing role-playing games, like all of us are, if you're interested in writing adventures, if you're interested in conveying a particular setting just through words and images, this is how you do it. It's a masterclass of it. So we open the book, and I don't want to kind of cut to my powdered hands, just kind of like leafing through. But there are a couple of things that I do want to show you. I mean, you open up the book, and this is the end paper, right? Look at that. There's a particular Polish artist. I forget his name, a 20th century artist. It was something like Bekiński or something like that. You can find it if you just Google like Polish nightmare artist, and he uses this kind of like beige color palette which permeates all the models. So photography of models on the on the left hand side. Yeah, you got what looks to be kind of Middenheimers, White Wolfers, facing off against kind of swarming bands of zombies. It's great. And then you have this, absolutely brilliant. I just look at it and like it makes my lizard brain go, oh wow, this is cool. Like there's so much stuff going on. There's so much stuff that you could kind of stare at. You look at the Sistine Chapel and you're like, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I like Michelangelo. Yeah, but if you were gonna get a big one of those big paint rollers and roll over it, like paint this instead, right? Paint this. This should go there. You turn to the first page with text, right? I mean, look at that. I'm going to have to read you this. This is the introductory tale. On the last year of the second millennium, 500 years before the rule of the most benevolent emperor, Karl Franz, there fell a time unlike any other. Just as they had before the birth of divine Sigma, the wings of fire in the sky again heralded the coming of great things, the coming of plague, the coming of war, the coming of pestilence and hunger. Though its unholy name is now stricken from the records of the great library of Altdorf and its ruins razed by Magnus, the savior of the empire, I would tell you the tale of the cursed city, brought low by the wrath of the gods. I would tell you the tale of Mordheim. I mean, that's just like great. I can't explain to you how. I mean, the typeface that is used. We don't talk about typefaces very often in role playing or tabletop gaming generally. We talk about things like formatting. I know Ben. Question B, let's talk about control panel format. He kind of coined that term of like being able to read everything for an encounter on the same page. Talking about how artwork and aesthetics match up. We don't talk about typefaces very much, and that's a bit of a missed trick. All of Warhammer's books, all of Games Workshop's books at this particular era are written in a typeface called ITC Garamond, a kind of squat version of Garamond. There is Microsoft Garamond. If you load up your Word, you can have a look at it. But ITC Garamond is squat. I always think it gives me something. My eyes something to hook onto. It creates a kind of sense of permanence and gravitas to the words, while also when it's bolded and italicized like a lot of this is, it looks like skittering beetles on the page. It's just really wonderful. And every single page has got these small vignetted piece of art on both sides, and there is loads and loads of it. If you want to run a role-playing game that is grimdark, that is lurid, that is frightening, that is also fantastical, you have to have a look through this book for its art, for its presentation. There's so much going on that I kind of can't get over this. And its rules, you should also play it, by the way. I've run, well, or been part of 2 campaigns of Mordheim. And Tuomas Pirinen, the lead designer, he's still really active on Facebook groups, like forums for the game. He's kind of running, he's setting up another kind of grimdark game right now. I can't remember what it's called, but he's still a really, really kind of like active in this community. And the Mordheim community is really, really, really active. So you should absolutely kind of check that out. And you should play the game. It uses rules that are really similar to Warhammer Fantasy Battles 6th edition. And Warhammer Fantasy Battles 6th edition actually has a set of skirmish rules which are kind of like retroactively informed by this game, the recovery phase. For rules of diving charges, jumping over things, fallings, who can shoot. It's brilliant, right? Because when you get 28mm models on the table, it's true line of sight. Now, some people don't like it. I love it. I love the idea of like having to get down and having a look. There is a particular tactile quality to using miniatures in a war game that is being lost because we are abstracting the point of miniatures in the rules, right? When you say that, oh, well, everything has a set height, like this piece of scenery is height too. It's like, well, yeah, but what's the point in using miniatures besides the fact that they look nice, which is not entirely the point, actually. Playing pieces are just that. They are playing pieces. They're not just nice art objects. To hit chart. I mean, everything about this is kind of embodied and lived. Just see if we can find some. I mean, there's some of this artwork here. There's lots of like people there, like mouths stitched shut, lots of strange carnivalesque art. Reminds me, it's interesting because Ian Miller is not listed as an artist in this, but he did do a lot of art for Warhammer. And it really reminds me of Ian Miller's art. A lot of this is John Blanche's hit. And John Blanche obviously is the grimdark, the grimdark jewel that pulses in the dark, right? That informs all of Warhammer's grimdark aesthetic. Rules for Hockland long rifles, blunderbusses, pistols, right? I mean, one game I played of this, I was playing witch hunters, and my lead witch hunter captain, he'd been knocked down and we were fighting against orcs. My wonderful friend Richard, who was playing the orcs, his orc leader jumps up into the doorway, into this ruined window, and my guy's scrambling around. We had him roll an initiative test to see if he could get his pistol up in time. And just as the orc leaps down, my guy gets out his spare pistol, bangs him through the jaw, and the guy goes down. You're like crushing him again. Absolutely brilliant stuff, because that's what a war game should do. It should be doing what a game master does in a role-playing game, which is driving the narrative, giving hooks for things to evoke that are interesting and meaningful. And that's exactly what Mordheim succeeds at. I could just, pour over this book all day. There's lots and lots of pictures of miniatures. I'm very grateful for the fact that I own a copy of this book, because it's not that easy to get hold of anymore. But like I said, I'm sure you can find a PDF online. There is a kind of legacy that Mordheim leaves behind in the skirmish miniatures war game kind of niche, that if you're watching this as a role play, which you probably are if you're watching my channel, it is worth kind of looking into and understanding these things and paying attention to it, because ultimately, if you like that stuff, you probably like this stuff as well. And that legacy that it leaves is probably best picked up by another war game called Frostgrave. Now, this is the first edition. There is actually a second edition of Frostgrave out that I don't own, but it's written Frostgrave, which is exactly the same, or almost exactly the same kind of shtick, which is a warband going into a ruined city. You don't know why Frostgrave, that's the name of the city in Frostgrave. It's eponymous. I think it's called Felstadt, actually. Frostgrave is like a kind of vulgar name that people have for it. Anyway, in this, you play your warland leader is always a wizard, and it's like lots of wizard duels, but it's exactly the same thing. You're going in, you're trying to find treasure, and this is a really, really wonderful war game. It uses D20s, and it's borrowing from that. And it's written by Joseph A. McCullough. Apologies again if I've mispronounced that. I think McCullough is a wonderful war games writer. We talk a lot about indie writers in the role-playing game space. We have an OSR, we have an old school Renaissance, we have this sense of looking back to look forwards, and how that informs our indie. War games doesn't really have that the same way. And that's a real shame. It doesn't have this like looking at old rule sets and going, oh, we like the kind of games that were evoked 10, 15 years ago. And why is that? And could we write a game now that succeeds in doing that? But to some extent, this does succeed in doing that. A lot of the artwork is by, especially in the second edition, is by an artist called, again, apologies if I'm mispronouncing it. It's obviously like a pseudonym, like an artist, like signature. It's Rumor, RU-MOR, and their work is absolutely wonderful as well. The only difference, obviously, is that I don't think that this understands why this is brilliant, because it's not just the rules. It is giving someone clear artistic direction and freedom to produce something that is absolutely wonderful. I hope in showing you this, and I'll link John Sorcerer's video below, I hope I'm energizing you to look into these kind of games and be interested, because only by reading loads of things, by running loads of games, by playing loads of games, do we get better as game masters? Do we get more proficient at this as players? And when I say players, I mean players in the general term. That's including game masters. But this is Mordheim. It'll be back to normal next time. We'll be talking about the music of the Spheres is Chaos by Goodman Games. But this is Mordheim. I, as ever, vastly appreciate you watching this and taking the time out of your day to listen to me. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I will speak again soon. Thank you.